advice yet, even though I know it's a brainstorming kind of project tuning, but we're wanting to really challenge Laura in her own thinking, and having her come to some of her own conclusions, or even having her come to more questions about her own project. That's great. So we're going to pose questions to her that get her to think deeper about her own project.
Well, it's nice how there's some examples on this.
Yeah, the next card has some examples and non-examples.
What do you see kids, like as you're doing this project, what do you see the kids learning? Specifically, what, I guess, because it is so open and broad.
Right.
Do you have any kind of goals, or could be, because I think you're going to be learning as you do this, right?
Right.
So what kind of things do you expect you and the students to be learning together?
I'm hoping that they learn more about Hawaii food systems in particular, because we're on an island and because a lot of the food comes from off island, like those foods in particular. Like I want them to see how their place in the world geographically is really affecting, really affects like the food that they put in their bodies, I guess, because I don't think a lot of people make a connection with that. And something about looking forward, just as they're going to become citizens of the world and are going to need to make those decisions about food, to start thinking about, okay, where do I want to be putting my money when I do get to make those decisions for myself. And I mean, they already are buying snacks and spending money on food, so what do they want to support? Yeah.
I have a question for you.
Yeah.
I'm interested in knowing why you picked these creative things for their project. Like, why these things?
Those sort of came out of, you mean the various options?
Yeah,
for
creative play, sculpture. I think what I'm thinking is you had said you weren't quite sure how to assess
Right.
the success. And so I'm wondering, how do these play, why these?
Yeah, okay. I wanted to give them options in how they're gonna respond, because basically, I mean, ideally, if we had a really long time, I would want them to come with a solution, because I think they're going to find that that the Hawaii's relationship with food is not very sustainable, and so ideally, I'd want them to come with a solution. But because we don't have that timeline, I want them to basically show me what you learned, and I want them to have as many avenues to do that as possible. So that's why the options. And so then I guess I came up with as many ways that I could think to express my thoughts when I was thinking about a system. So that's why like one thing leads to another. That's why the board game, a play has a beginning, middle, and an end that can tell a story. So you could tell a story of food. The eating activity is more like I could choose to try to eat local for a week or a day or a meal, and then do a journal about that. So that would be like a more activity focused. To also obviously to touch on the different kinds of learners, I guess is my real answer to that. I have a lot of kids that are great with film that could make an amazing movie of just the story. We were going to watch that Story of Stuff video. They could do like a story of a piece of broccoli. Like, what's the from the field to table story of that? They could write a paper, as we've been working on analytical papers, comparing something from Good Earth, or dance. So basically, I was just trying to reach all the different kinds of learners and let them all feel like, okay, even though Miss Davis picked this topic of food, I have something that I get to choose about this project.
I like it. Mm-hmm. That was my other question, with the accommodations, which you hit, I thought. My other question is with the assessments.
Yeah.
Do you think do you think assessing all of those is important for this project? Do you have to do that in order to make sure that you're hitting certain grades, or do you think you could focus on one or two of them?
You mean criterion A, B, or C?
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know. I wasn't sure if to be an IB project, if it needs to have all three, or if I could just focus on one. Maybe Pavana could speak to that. I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, when we had looked at this earlier, basically the guidance was just pick what fits your desired outcome, right? So it could really just be one.
Okay.
But if it happens to hit, so you said, well, it's an English class, and so I do need them to have some kind of written component, then it makes sense to go ahead and pull, you know, whatever traits off of criterion C that fit writing, which the ones you picked, I think, match, you know, well with the project. But as you go along, you might adjust your goals.
Yeah.
Right? You might realize, like, okay, all the kids are deciding to do dance. So maybe we'll just adjust, you know, and that criterion there it's not relevant anymore.
Right.
That's okay. I mean, I think it's more important to have the right fit to what your desired outcome is, rather than have an awkward fit, just to make sure we cover, you know, all the criteria.
Right.
I don't think that's good. Okay. The next step is actually our tuna discussion. Any other thought-provoking questions for Laura?
Well, my one question is, I think as you're presenting this, you're going to have to address the question, can we work in pairs and partners and groups? So something I think you just, you know, do you want to think about that? Is that a suggestion again? Thought-provoking.
Have you considered?
Have you considered
grouping?
group work and your single and then how you're going to assess that?
Yeah.
And, you know, what kind of rubric you're going to use? Also, you know, have you thought about what kind of rubric you're going to use that can encompass all of these different activities?
Yeah, that's my biggest hang up when I go this open, is to create a rubric that will match all these different possible creations they could make. That's why I came up with this creativity, connectivity, and conventions as a possible rubric for this project. Just because since it is a system, if they can explain the relationships, the connection between different elements of it, then that would really show me that they figured that they've gotten what I want them to get out of it, how one thing affects another. And the partners and groups, I'm tempted to just let them work with who they want, because I find that they work a lot harder when they don't have to get over, when they're like, we meet on the weekend, the three of us see each other every day, and they, when they work with their friends, they learn a lot from each other, so I think I might do that. Definitely groups, because this is a lot of work for one person to take on.
We'll move on to step 4, tuner discussion. So her burning questions are, how do students know when they have learned what they're supposed to learn from this unit? And how can I measure that? And she has there her 3 kind of criteria for success for the kids, that they show creativity, connectivity, with her essential question there, the relationship, Hawaii's relationship with food, and is it sustainable, and conventions of the communication. Writing or-
Yeah, I was thinking in terms of, well, and that's when this gets tricky, because what are the conventions of dance, what are the conventions of board games, you know, one person can't possibly know all of those conventions.
So, whatever the structure is for communicating their learning,
Right.
the appropriate conventions.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So this is where we get to discuss, and if the room were big enough, Laura would step out of the circle. And that the physical, you know, removing of the presenter is so that it's just reminding us, as we discussed, to not pose questions to her anymore. That she really is outside of this conversation now. But she's listening and taking it in and processing. So what did we hear? What didn't we hear that might be relevant?
Well, one of the things I heard Laura say was that she was kind of feeling a little, maybe not overwhelmed isn't what she said, but something to the effect of the rubrics and how to put that together so that it really showed her what the expectations for the kids and also what she wanted them to learn. And I was wondering in my head, one of the things I thought of was we talked about those conventions, or I think it wasn't just the conventions. I'm thinking maybe it's more about the big idea that she wants them to learn, their project, their creative project, to show that they are able to, there's creativity, connectivity. But the convention, I'm not sure is necessarily the writing part, it's more of the content part of what they're able to pull from the sustainability, from this essential question. And I was thinking, to create a rubric, it might be beneficial to create first a checklist. So the kids get a checklist that might say, you have to include these things in your project somehow, and then that checklist could help create the rubric. Is that making any sense?
Yeah.
Anyway, so that's kind of where my head went. So I'm not sure it's necessarily the writing so much as it's the content for this specific project.